I've had enough of pinching pennies. I'm exhausted by it. When we first tied the knot, my husband praised me as a prudent and thrifty wife. But in just 3 short years, he's changed so much. Your complexion looks patchy, doesn't it? You don't take good care of your skin, do you? Are you even still a woman? Those were his parting words before he stormed out. Yet he never anticipated the regret that would follow his rash departure. Nor did he bother to ask the most important question. My name is Madison, and at 31, I hold down a full-time job. It's been a year since I divorced my husband, who is 3 years my senior, after he left me for another woman. We were married for just 3 years. Even before our marriage, I harbored ambitious dreams, and together, my husband and I worked diligently towards them, leading a modest life, never squandering a cent. You're remarkable for your age, so disciplined and frugal. My husband used to marvel, observing the steadfastness with which I managed my affairs. He was quick to envision a future together. Within a year of courtship, he proposed, and we became husband and wife. Yet I kept my most cherished dream concealed, deeming it too far-fetched to share. I feared his ridicule if I were to divulge it. Instead, I engaged him in our frugality game, meticulously managing our finances without disclosing the ultimate purpose. As time passed and our marriage matured, my husband underwent a subtle transformation. You still meticulously track every penny. You spend so much time with those account books. He jest, poking fun at my thriftiness. It's almost refreshing to find an error. He'd add with a smirk, while I found solace in the precision of my records, treating it like a personal challenge. Unfazed, my husband would retreat to his phone, leaving me to my calculations. When our daughter arrived, I took on a part-time job as a newspaper delivery person to supplement our income. My early morning departures irritated my husband, but our daughter slept soundly, as if she sensed the importance of my endeavor, my dream. Through rigorous economizing and additional work, I steadily grew our savings until they reached a point where my husband couldn't scoff when I finally revealed my dream to him. "Listen, honey, there's something I need to talk to you about," I began, ready to finally share my long-held dream with my husband. But before I could say another word, he cut me off with a strange irritation in his voice. "Shut up! Are you going to lecture me about saving money again? Every day, it's save this, save that. It's getting old," he snapped. It wasn't news to me that he had grown increasingly annoyed with my frugality over the years. Sensing his frustration, I had refrained from mentioning anything about saving money for quite some time. But it seemed even the mere presence of my efforts to eliminate waste had become suffocating for him. "You act like you've achieved something when you've done nothing. What's with that smug look?" he continued, his words cutting deep. As he criticized me, I couldn't help but think how all the qualities he once admired about me had now become faults in his eyes. Every interaction with him seemed like an unwarranted attack, blaming me for things beyond my control. It was as if his perception of me had shifted drastically, while I remained unchanged. He no longer found joy in our shared endeavor of saving money. Instead, he sought distractions to vent his frustrations. It dawned on me then that perhaps he had never truly shared my values of thriftiness and stability. Maybe he was merely intrigued by the novelty of it all when we first met. I recall the drunken confession he made once, admitting to squandering his mother's savings without her consent, despite previously claiming she had passed away. It became evident that he had always been a reckless spender, lacking in financial discipline. In realizing this, I understood that our differences in money management ran deeper than I had initially thought. It wasn't just a matter of differing viewpoints, it was a fundamental misalignment of values. After listening to my story, I foresaw my husband's growing reluctance towards our frugal lifestyle. As expected, he began to express irritation with saving money and gradually revealed his true character. Night after night, he returned home inebriated, neglecting to provide us with enough money for essentials. One evening, as he stumbled in during the wee hours, I mustered the courage to confront him. "Can you at least leave some money for our daughter's milk? You're her father, aren't you?" I pleaded. His response was dismissive, claiming his earnings as his own to spend as he pleased. Eventually, he ceased contributing to our household altogether. I couldn't ignore the flickering shadow of another woman in his life, nor his increasing belligerence towards me. It reached a point where he either absented himself for days on end or moved in with his mistress. Realizing the futility of salvaging our marriage, I made the decision to leave. I refused to remain tethered to a man who shirked his responsibilities, indulged in vices, and failed to provide for us. With both my parents gone and a baby to care for, I turned to my maternal aunt for support. Despite my reluctance to burden her, I confided in her about my predicament and asked to stay with her for a while. Understanding my plight, she welcomed me into her home, having gone through a divorce herself. I gathered my courage, filed for divorce, and moved out of the apartment I once shared with my husband. It was a rare occasion when someone visited our home during those turbulent times. Later, as the divorce proceedings unfolded, my husband contacted me, claiming he had signed the papers. We met at a cafe where he presented me with a bulging envelope from his jacket pocket, cautioning against any future disputes. Inside the envelope lay a substantial sum of money, accompanied by his declaration of intent to marry into a wealthy family. Seeing through his pitiful attempt to buy his way out of our marriage, I couldn't help but retort with biting sarcasm. If you marry into wealth, you won't need to worry about saving anymore. As those words left my lips, I couldn't shake the thought that a woman who would entertain a man like my husband couldn't possibly be as wealthy as he claimed. At best, she might be running a small business. Yet, my husband departed without a hint of love or concern for our daughter. In turn, I saw no reason to disclose to him the identity of the visitor who had graced our doorstep the day I left with our daughter. Leaving my daughter in the care of my aunt, I returned to work. One day, much to my surprise, my aunt remarked, "Since you've been here, the utility bills have decreased." I couldn't help but chuckle at her observation. I have a knack for saving money, I confessed proudly. Eager to repay my aunt's kindness, I got creative. My thrifty nature and keen eye for waste allowed me to identify areas where we could cut costs. When I shared my strategies with her, she was amazed. "I must tell my friends about this. They'll be thrilled," she exclaimed. Grateful for her support, I gathered her friends and shared my money-saving techniques with them. Their enthusiasm surpassed my expectations, and soon they were eager to spread the word to others. What started as a simple gesture of gratitude blossomed into regular lectures on financial efficiency. My aunt, impressed by my unexpected talent, proposed charging for my services. Through these lectures, I swiftly rebuilt the savings I had lost in the divorce and finally achieved my long-held dream. About a year after the divorce, while visiting a hall for one of my lectures, I noticed a man in work attire carrying materials. As I observed him casually, something about him caught my attention. As I locked eyes with the figure, I realized it was my former husband. His gaze met mine, and recognition dawned on his face. In a split second, I felt a sinking sensation in my stomach, but it was too late. A smug grin spread across his face from a distance. Desiring no conversation, I feigned ignorance and made a swift exit through the hall's exit. However, he pursued me and intercepted my path. "You don't have to run away. We're divorced," he declared with a half-smile, as if proud of some achievement I hadn't even heard of. "I've been put in charge of a company owned by my wife's father. I'm here to oversee some work with my team. I'm slated to become the company president, so I'm quite busy," he boasted, peering at me expectantly. Then, with a mocking tone, he asked about my situation. "I heard you're on welfare. Despite your penny pinching, if you can't earn, you're still going to struggle, right?" His sarcastic grin was unmistakable as he awaited my response. I furrowed my brow in disbelief. "Who are you confusing me with?" I retorted sharply. He maintained his half-smile, unfazed, and continued his barrage of accusations. "Didn't you go begging to the landlord of our old apartment for a loan?" His laughter punctuated his words. Then his demeanor shifted briefly to seriousness. I went to collect some belongings left behind when I moved out. The landlord mentioned something about you struggling and suggested welfare. Was that not you? His doubtful gaze scrutinized me, but I stood before him impeccably dressed, my appearance hardly resembling that of someone on welfare. I explained I had forgotten until now. Your mother visited shortly before our divorce, seeking financial help. Out of sympathy, I obliged. She was the visitor who came when I was leaving, not a representative of my financial state. My revelation seemed to genuinely surprise him. You're joking, right? Mom is alive, seriously. If she knew my current situation, she might demand her money back. He revealed the turmoil his mother had faced upon discovering he had squandered her diligently saved savings. As I locked eyes with my former husband in the hall, I realized with a sinking feeling that he had spotted me too. Before I could slip away, his grin widened, and he hurried over to intercept me. No need to run off. We're divorced, he remarked with a half smile, flaunting something I hadn't heard. I've been put in charge of a company owned by my wife's father. I'm going to be the president, so I've got a lot on my plate, he continued, his gaze lingering on me. Then, with a mocking tone, he inquired about my situation. I heard you're on welfare. Despite all your savings, you're still struggling, aren't you? I furrowed my brow in response. Who are you confusing me with? I retorted. Unfazed, he persisted, claiming I had sought a loan from our former landlord. Amused by his accusations, I chuckled. I was there to collect my belongings after moving out, he added, his tone shifting momentarily. The landlord mentioned welfare. Wasn't that you? He questioned, casting a doubtful glance my way. Dressed impeccably in recognizable brands, with my hair and nails meticulously groomed, I hardly resembled a welfare recipient. I explained, your mother visited our old apartment before we divorced. She needed money, and I couldn't turn her away. His incredulous expression betrayed genuine surprise. Mom's alive. No joke. If she knew of how I lived now, she might want that money back, he remarked, his tone tinged with regret. His mother, who had been abandoned by her son after he squandered her savings, recounted her struggles tearfully. Despite her son's remorse, he never repaid her. Upon visiting me, she revealed her desire to reconcile, having tracked down our address through a relative. Sensing my husband's unease, I informed him that I had given her his company name, although I had left the job 3 months prior to oversee my in-laws' business. My husband appeared relieved until I disclosed that I had passed on the envelope containing the money from our divorce settlement, now belonging to his wife's family company, as a gesture of goodwill. His shock was palpable as he struggled to comprehend the depth of his mother's plight. As I recounted her situation, he grew increasingly agitated, finally breaking into a cold sweat. As I suggested informing his mother of his current employment, his phone rang, likely his current wife calling. Startled, he fumbled for his phone, his expression a mix of panic and disbelief. Suppressing a laugh, I responded, Is she asking me to take care of her? With a casual wave goodbye to my husband, engrossed in his phone call, I strode towards the neighboring apartment building. My husband, noticing my departure, interrupted his conversation, beckoning me to wait. Where do you think you're going? That's an expensive building. You'll get in trouble if you go in without permission, he cautioned. Turning to face him, I revealed, I'm the owner of this building. I've rented out all the other units, but my daughter and I reside on the top floor. His stunned silence spoke volumes. I explained that my dedication to thriftiness stemmed from a desire to purchase such a property. I had just saved enough money to do so when you began to resist frugality, I admitted, causing him to drop his phone in shock. But I had another revelation for him. I inherited a substantial sum from my parents. Instead of squandering it, I invested in real estate, turning my savings into assets worth $5 million, I revealed, gazing up at the building proudly. My husband marveled at my success, expressing regret for not providing such a lifestyle for me himself. Well, she can make her unlucky son pay for all the hard work he's done with millions in debt and interest, he remarked bitterly. Amidst my laughter, I offered to teach his mother money-saving techniques and share tips for growing his fledgling company. Ignoring his attempts to engage further, I entered the apartment building, leaving him stunned in the hallway. He hurried after me, but I paid him no mind, knowing he couldn't follow me inside. Once inside my home on the top floor, I promptly contacted a trusted real estate agent, grateful for the opportunities my prudent investments had afforded me. Actually, I have an apartment I'd like to sell next. I'm considering buying a house with an ocean view. Would you be willing to discuss this with me again? I proposed, eager to move on from the apartment now that my husband was aware of it. Though I doubted he could do anything about it, I wanted to relinquish it just in case. My aunt, having overheard my conversation, brewed a pot of tea and brought it over. I also invited the woman who had been caring for my daughter, and the three of us sat together, discussing our plans for the future amidst laughter and camaraderie. As for my husband, I never encountered him again in the hallway next to the apartment where we crossed paths. Instead, I noticed a different man overseeing the proceedings, an older gentleman. Perhaps my husband faced consequences for his actions towards his mother, or perhaps he simply moved on. Either way, it was no longer my concern. I resolved to focus on my work and continue raising my daughter in the company of trustworthy individuals who truly cared for us. With a sense of liberation and optimism for the future, I embraced the next chapter of my life.